Call the informational meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the City Council staff report by Deborah Owen, our City Clerk.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll make this very quickly. No report. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's easy. Next item is Mayor Munson's. Mark Cotter has indicated he has a topic for discussion, the mayor's time.
Good afternoon, City Council. Is that on? Is that on? Testing. Is that on?
There you go.
Okay. Okay, I just want to give you the City Council an update on the discussions that the city has had on the Harrisburg wastewater agreement, and there is a clean copy on your desk. And one of the areas I'd like you to turn to, if you would, is page 2. Part 1, Section 2 and 3 are the two sections of the agreement that have been modified in the last, since the last time this item was brought before the City Council. And just to recap, so you know where we started and where we're at today. Essentially, we were working with the City of Harrisburg to set them up on a contract that's very similar to other jurisdictions that pump wastewater to the City of Sioux Falls. The initial approach was that they were able to pump to the City of Sioux Falls off-peak, meaning in the middle of the night. They still will operate their lagoons, and so at least in the near term, it would be partially treated wastewater. And then when that point in time comes where the east side of Sioux Falls starts to mature and their flows also increase and there's a demand to actually build the future wastewater facility, at that point in time they would pay their proportionate share. As most of you know, that those conditions did not meet the expectations of the IRAB board, and so to attempt to address, instead of having them pay in or buy in at that point in time when that wastewater plant is justified, is that we would try to come up with a better approach that could recognize that there is a cost to buy in to the reserve capacity, and that initial option, since we've had very limited time, was to recognize a multiplier on their rates. And we recognized initially a 2.0 multiplier, and then with further discussions and then with looking at other ways regional sanitary sewer models really work, that didn't really provide that justification, that economically based approach, that we could truly tell Harrisburg what it costs to buy in. And so our recommendation is actually to commence a comprehensive wastewater regionalization study right away in 2010, and at the end of that study, which we expect could take up to 18 months, that we would recognize what the City of Harrisburg pays in as a result of the multiplier greater than 1.0 and apply that to what they to their cost to buy into the city system. And so now if you go to Section 2, again, there's a short-term approach and a long-term approach to this. And the short-term approach is we recognize that it's in the city's best interest. We've also obviously been working in good faith with the City of Harrisburg for 2 years to find them a feasible solution. That the short term would be to ask for your support tonight to sign a contract with Harrisburg so they can actually recognize their stimulus funds, build their project, and then the long-term approach is Public Works and Planning will initiate a long-term comprehensive wastewater study in January to really quantify what this economical unit is to buy into the system. So item 2, we do have a multiplier on their rate, and it's not a flat 2.0. After discussions with the City of Harrisburg and various groups and with the direction of the IRAB board this last week to actually have an escalating multiplier on their rate, the system would start with a multiplier of 1.25, and that would carry them through the end of 2010. It would also include 1.25 through the middle of 2011. July of 2011 through December of 2011, that multiplier would increase to 1.5, and then lastly, we would reach that 2.0 multiplier from January of 12 and beyond. And essentially that allows for a 1.25 multiplier in the next 18 months which is the time period we believe it'll take us to actually write a long-term program. And the discussion in the next paragraph just really puts what that means in cost to writing. Part 3 basically says that Sioux Falls and Harrisburg agree that there needs to be a comprehensive wastewater regional study to quantify what this unit cost is. And then the second paragraph says that if acceptable to both parties and that if the agreement is able to be amended prior to the exercise of any contractual renewal period provided herein, and the contractual periods are, it's a 5-year contract with 3 5-year renewals. And then at that point in time, if the regional policy is accepted by the City of Sioux Falls, that at that time we'll amend the agreement to include that methodology and also establish terms on how the City of Harrisburg buys in. And so, other than that, the agreement is what it's been. Again, the short-term approach is to have a multiplier on their rate that essentially recognizes there is a cost to buy in. And then item 3 recognizes that we don't have that cost today. But at the end of the study, we will recognize what they've paid in based on the multiplier above 1.0 and essentially credit that back to ultimately what they will owe the City of Sioux Falls. Any questions?
Councilor Benninga?
Mark, first of all, thank you for your work in redoing this. My question, and I haven't read through the whole thing, but after the study is done, which is projected to take as long as 18 months, which would be about the end of June of 2011, is it possible to modify or change the multiplier as of July 1st based on that study? Since
Yes.
this is a 5-year contract, is there an
If
amendment? Go ahead.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
That's essentially what item 3 is. It essentially says, second paragraph, that if the comprehensive regional wastewater study approach is accepted as policy, meaning of this policy board, then prior to the normal renewal period, both parties will meet, and if acceptable, the terms will open up the agreement, implement the new policy, which likely will mean the no multiplier, because we'll essentially then go from just a multiplier on their rate to a 2-part system, which is usage and then cost to buy in for reserve capacity. Okay?
I guess from my point, I don't think anybody was too excited about the multiplier being, for the lack of a better term, a swag equation. So I'm thankful that we've got the ability to make some changes to that.
Certainly.
Councilor Jameson?
Mark, once the study is done and new effects take place, that'll include all the other cities, right? Like T, if they hook up, Renner.
I think
Brandon,
those will likely be some of the key discussions that actually take place. That we've heard from the City of T, they really want to be at the table for this study. We've had good discussions with the City of Brandon and Renner. And so likely I think our commitment to them has been once your contract is expired, then we will incorporate these things into the next contract. And so unless they are acceptable terms to both parties that we would open up those agreements, that language is not in those agreements.
Okay, thanks.
I also know that once you're done with comments from me, I know Mayor Ramstead from Harrisburg would also, if you have time, would also like to say a few words.
Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Mark, on the multiplier, was there any rational reason for that, or was this just more of a political compromise that was made?
Well, going back to the very beginning, multipliers do not have an economic basis to them. They are truly a philosophical level that's established normally on inside and outside customers. And so I initially recommended the 2.0 based on what we've read and also multipliers that we currently have in place. And so 2.0 was recommended also with going up to the Twin Cities to actually study their Met Council regional model. I also sourced that question to them, and they had they certainly recognize that that's probably at the ceiling of multipliers. And so that's why when we came back, we worked with the various groups to actually have a phased-in approach with that multiplier, recognizing that I think with the meetings we've had with Brandon and certainly with Harrisburg and the ones we expect to have with T, that they're going to need a vehicle to actually buy reserve capacity so we can, as a region, take advantage of an economy of scale. We all know that EPA's effluent regulations of what we discharge to streams will likely not decrease. And so when those regulations come out over time, the resources can just be directed to one plant as opposed to all the interested regional communities having their own plants. So there's a lot better economy of scale that can take advantage and also much better environmental decisions that can be had. And so the multiplier is essentially just recognizes that there is a cost, and we'll also look back on that, what's been paid in above the 1.0, and essentially provide them a credit to offset. Okay.
Any other questions?
Would also like to ask that item be moved up in the agenda. There was also discussion at the IRAB meeting that there would be a second resolution brought forward that just formally commensurates this regional study, and if the study results are not adopted, what will take place. And we're still getting input on that language. We had some draft language out, and we're still getting comments, and so I would expect to bring that to the City Council in January.
Mark, is that going to cause any concern with the development community on that, or?
Well, I think one of the key things is that we want to make sure is that I think collectively we believe that if we can all have all the regional cities sit down, we will find a good economically based way to buy reserve capacity. There are some very specific things that were proposed on that resolution that I think from our ability to have our legal staff review and also just to have all the matters at the table discussed, we focused our time today on the final edits of this, and then just with it going into the holiday time, I think that it would be a lot better for the City of Sioux Falls when we start to draft our scope, because we will hire a professional facilitator that does this kind of work, that structures regional sewer approaches, that I certainly also want to glean from them of what are some of the things that a community should be thinking about if this approach doesn't go forward specifically to each entity. And so, the development community, citizens of Sioux Falls certainly have my commitment that that resolution will address a good solution long term.
Could you, would it be prudent to reach out to them, the people that have been involved in the discussion over the last 2 or 3 weeks, to just let them know that ahead of time so they don't expect that that's going to happen and then it doesn't happen?
I certainly will, and that's why I also wanted to verbalize it tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Ramstad.
Thank you, Council. I just wanted to reiterate a few things. We are 100% for this, for regionalization. Probably the biggest thing on the contract that we're really struggling with is the factor that's involved here. We're talking about a factor of 1.25. When we originally started this 2 years ago with the City of Sioux Falls, there was no factor involved in that, and it was a rate of $1.80, and it went up to $1.85, and now it's talking of a factor of a potential 2. That is very hard for the City of Harrisburg to digest. When you guys did the study back in June for both your residents, the City of Renner, the City of Brandon, and the City of Harrisburg was involved in that, you came up with the rate, and that is how you came up with the rate for your residents. That's also how you came up for your rate for Brandon and Renner at that time, and then using that rate is how you came up with $1.85 for Harrisburg. If we go from $1.85 to the $3.70, we're talking about a factor of going in there and doubling the rates of the sewer rates for the citizens of Harrisburg. Right now, on the $1.85 for 5,000 gallon, which is considered an average household, it will be at $37.35 for our residents monthly bill. If you could do the multiplier of 2, it'll go up to $46.60 per resident. Just as a comparison, what you adopted in June for the residents of Sioux Falls would be a rate of $16.40 per month. So you can see how much drastic of a change it is from the residents of Sioux Falls as compared to the residents of Harrisburg just for their sewer rate. What I'm asking here tonight is we'll accept a $1.25 factor for the whole time of the contract. Because what that is, yes, it will be negotiated when that rate study is done, but it also says in that contract that if the regionalization doesn't come about, it stays at 2. We don't think that is fair. We would accept the $1.25 for the whole time, or the factor of 1.25 for that whole time, for it not to escalate. We're going to get credit for it. I understand that, and that's great with us, too, that we'll get credit for that. But whether we pay 1.25 and get credit or we pay 2 and get credit, it's easier for us to digest and understand and work into it, into our future at $1.25 than it is to go to 2 right away, or pretty darn quick, within 18 months to 2. That's our concern. And any questions for me?
Councilor Jamison?
Reed, what was your rate at 1.25? What would your monthly rate go to?
That would go up to 37.35.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. The only other comment I would make on this is the Harrisburg Council is going to, the way I understand it, if it's still the same plan, is going to be in session. So the mayor will sign the contract at our meeting and has to get run down to Harrisburg so that they can sign it yet tonight while they're in session. So I'm going to make a motion to move this item in front, item 21, in front of 13 tonight. So that'll be the reason. Is that changed?
That is correct. Our council meeting starts at 6 o'clock. We're going to start then. But then myself and That is correct. Tonight, our plan is at 6 o'clock is our normal meeting time. We'll have that. We'll take care of some business. Then Councilmember Troy Lubers and I will come to the Sioux Falls Council and be here by 7 o'clock. And then we'll go from there as to what happens at this council member meeting, and then we'll take it back to our council meeting to hopefully get it approved by both councils tonight.
So everybody understands what's going on. Any other questions on this item? Council Litz?
I guess I'm still kind of confused. Mayor Ramstad was talking about a 1.25 thing, and I thought Mr. Cotter said a 1 point. Mark, could I please ask you, we're starting out with a 1.0 and then going to 1.25, and then at what point does it go up to 1.50? Was that 2 years from now in 11?
It's approximately 19 months from now is when it will escalate from 1.25 to 1.5. And we recognize this. This has been one of the changes that we've offered today. Earlier is that our initial multiplier for the first 6 months of 11 was at 1.5. And as we've listened to many groups, we've also listened to the City of Harrisburg and certainly want them at the table working collaboratively with us on this comprehensive approach. And so that's why we've had the 1.25 for 2010 and then continued the 1.25 for the 6 months of 2011, and then that will escalate to 1.5 for the second 6 months of 11. Those are the two numbers that we've softened today to allow Harrisburg to actually phase this into their rates better than what we originally proposed. So we've made that attempt, understanding that Harrisburg would prefer that it be 1.25 until the comprehensive model is established, and then the agreement be opened. And again, I think that we've tried to work collaboratively with many groups on this item, and this is a compromise that we believe we can support.
So then we're essentially the 1.25 is in effect for 18 months then, long enough to get the study done. At the time we get the study done, then that we would make that determination as to what we go from there. Is that correct?
That's right. The 1.25 would be in place from potentially tonight, if it's supported, all the way through till July 1st of 2011. And we'll work to write this study within 18 months.
And then I'd just like to add, Mark, I know you've worked long and hard on this, and we've beat you up pretty good on it, and you've addressed a lot of groups, and I've received phone calls and other communiques from affected parties that are in approval of what we're proposing here tonight. And there was 3 people that called me today on this here, and I got emails. So I think Mark's plan here makes a lot of sense. And I've heard when this thing first came about here a couple of weeks ago, I had to have some time to digest everything and think about it, and I thought that the 2.0 multiplier probably was higher than probably what it should be. And the idea that we were subsidizing Harrisburg came about, but subsequently, I've also uncovered some other information. In 1972, we had the Clean Water Act of America was passed by Congress, and we were subsidized by the federal government to build our first treatment plant out there. The money that we borrow for these sewer projects is SRF money. It's federal pass-through dollars with some state added into it. That's a subsidy. Mark also made a trip up to Minneapolis and found out that they went from 40 down to 7 treatment plants in the area that they service up there. So regionalization, I think, is our future. And, with the EPA regs that we've got coming along here, I think what we're proposing, the direction we're proposing, I can't see us doing anything but regionalization. And the details are that we're going to have to work out what is equitable for all the parties involved. And I certainly don't want to, inhibit growth down in Harrisburg, and I don't want to take advantage of another municipality just because we can. I don't think that's fair, and I think that when the state provides us money with SRF, they have a reasonable expectation that we are a regional provider and we share our facilities with each other. So what Mark's proposing here tonight, I'm going to encourage everybody to vote for. I've spent a lot of time looking at it as well. And then I'm also very excited about the study that's going to happen, because we're looking at maybe even changing the policy on the way we get paid back for the sewer that we put in, the infrastructure that we put in, and we may come across some really good ideas that we've never had before. So I'm excited about this, and I hope we support it tonight.
Thank you.
Councilor Knudsen?
Director Cotter, why will it take 18 months to study this issue? That seems like a long time to me.
Well, I think one of the key factors is we're not sure where the interested cities are in their planning, because likely Harrisburg's there. And our planning department's done a nice job getting us there to the 2035 plan, and our engineering team. So our work is essentially done, as well as the city of Harrisburg, but we do want to get at least T to the table, Brandon, Renner, and then we'll certainly open it up to any other interested communities, likely within the range of maybe out to 20 miles. And so then those teams would necessarily, they're going to have 60 to 90 days at least to probably give us some predicted flows and strengths. So they're going to have to hire an engineer and do quite a bit of background work. And then at the same parallel track, we'll start to meet with you to get some financial parameters established on what would be acceptable by policy. And then it just, just from what I've seen from reading the respective requests for proposals for these types, there's just an enormous amount of meetings. And I know you're all schedules, and so since you're not available every day of the week, likely it just takes time to actually get people to the table. There'll be a lot of individual meetings. So I don't think the analysis takes that long, but there is a planning period that the communities need to go through, and then there's also study phase, and then the last stage is really implementation through a city council, and that can some days take 6 months to 90 days to 6 months.
Councilor Bannigan?
Mark, a follow-up question after Mr. Ramstad's comments. If, in fact, it takes 18 months for us to do this study, which is understandable, and we go right to the end of June, the beginning of July, aren't we forcing their hand on a rather quick basis to make a decision before their rate goes to $1.50?
Well, the intention would be is that there's going to be a collaborative effort all along the way, and so they're going to be at the table. And so I wouldn't say that we're going to be studying this solution and then present it to them and ask them to make a decision. They'll be at the table since day one. So.
But they won't know the final agreement rate, so to speak, until potentially 18 months from now.
No, that's a good point. One of the things, and I'll just direct you to some of the details, is that in Part 2, because Mayor Ramstad called me on this today and we actually amended it, is that one of the sentences actually establishes to include, let me just read it because I think this is probably important for all, is that if the comprehensive wastewater regionalization study results are approved as policy by the Sioux Falls City Council, both Sioux Falls and Harrisburg will meet, and if acceptable to both parties, this agreement will be amended prior to the exercise of any contract renewal period provided herein, and then this was what was modified or added today, to include the approved policy of the Comprehensive Wastewater Regionalization Study and establish the terms to buy reserve capacity. So we recognize that they will, once we offset what they've paid in through the multiplier, there's still going to be a cost for their existing community, and that when we open this up, we'll also establish reasonable terms for them to come whole on that obligation. So we added that today per Mayor Ramstad's request. So,
I guess the bottom line is if we're going to be a good neighbor, which we certainly want to be, we don't want to force their hand in having them make a quick decision based on a contractual date that's been discussed a year and a half ago.
that's right. And I think we recognize, too, that the study could take more evaluation. So we've caveated it to be a minimum of 18 months, but we're going to go to work in January to get it started.
You know, for my 2 cents on a couple of things, I've had two frustrations with this whole topic. One is that it came to light at at the 11th hour, and I think there's probably reasonable explanation for that. But the other part of it is the multiplier, and I know 2.0 is high, but what's the right multiplier? I mean, there's nothing that we have right now that's grounded in any kind of statistical information that supports any number. So we're kind of shooting at the dark, and I hate to say that, but nobody has any firm grasp of what the proper multiplier is, and this study will go a long ways to help us determining that, I think, at the end as well.
That's right.
So
our intent is to certainly go away from the multiplier and have a good economically sound footing to stand on.
yeah. Deborah, had a comment?
I did. I actually had a question, maybe for Gail Eastland. I'm not sure which one of you, but there was a talk about having the mayor sign the contract first. I was just asking, did you mean that he was going to sign the resolution first, and then the contract would go to Harrisburg for their ratification of it, and then back to the mayor? Or
I think the intention is if you as a governing body support this tonight, then they can take the same draft agreement and the path of those signatures can be executed as normal.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that there's some language in the resolution that tells us how to do that, but I wanted to make sure I understood that clearly from you or from Gail. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so wait, I'm sorry, I lost. So we're going to approve the resolution, the contract goes to Harrisburg will sign it,
Yes.
and then it'll come back up
Yes.
That's correct.
tomorrow, whatever.
That's right.
And the mayor sign it, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda, if there's any other questions on this, I assume not. Okay, we'll move on. Audit Committee, no report. Fiscal Committee? No report. Land Use Committee?
Yes. This evening, we have item 20 for a first reading dealing with the revised campground ordinance.
Public Service Committee?
Meeting next week after the informational.
Okay. City Council open discussion. Councilor Jameson?
I just want to add to Kermit's report on the land use that the Land Use Committee does recommend approval, even though it is the first reading. We've spent a lot of time reviewing that topic, but I just wanted to add that.
Sure. That's fine.
So,
Okay. Any other open discussion? Okay, we'll move into our presentations. First one on the agenda is Director Rowan Horse with the monthly financial update. Gene?
Gene Roanhorse, Director of Finance. I really don't have a lot to tell you today. We've got everything buttoned down, and we've held back about $7 million in the operating side of the budget, and now we wait and see what happens. We have two big variables that are really going to make us or break us, and that is the sales tax number is one of them. And they cut the sales tax off on December 20th, which is a little, or November 20th, which is a little bit early. It's within the range of what they've normally been doing, but it is on the short end of the range. So we would hope that the sales tax would come back, have a little extra in there. Right now, you've seen the report I think I sent out to you Thursday or Friday. We were at 4.1% negative. And that's very important, obviously, in what happens at the end of the year. We have two more checks that are coming. One will come in the end of November. We've got that one. So we've got the. Let me get straightened out here. We got one coming in the middle of December. We got one coming the end of December, and we got one coming in the middle of July or January. Is where we're at. That's the ones that are still outstanding. Question is, how they cut this thing off will make a big difference, or could.
So, Gene, and we always take the first check in January and apply that back to the previous year.
That's
and that's been a tradition or longstanding policy that we've had. How will that affect, will there be a clean cutoff on December 31? Like they moved it up in November. Does that mean will we always make sure we got a clean cutoff on December 31, or how does that?
Well, you have as clean a cutoff as you can with dealing with the state and their remittance of their money. I'm not sure I'm answering your question or what your question really is. We'll get a check at the end of December, but.
So we're still, we never really will have any kind of idea whether or not as Councilor Jamison just said, the calendar matches the checks.
That's kind of correct.
Councilor Bennigan?
Gene, last year was the cutoff for the state before or after Black Friday? Do you know?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
That's one of the largest sales tax revenue days of the year. It would make a huge difference in the projections, obviously.
Yes, it would. I can go back and look at it. See
I think that'd be important to know.
Where they cut it off last year. But
well, it would give us some indication of where we're probably going to be at in December, if in fact we can use that cutoff date to project where we're going to be for the month of December, so departments would have some idea on what the revenue sources are going to be.
We'll take a look at it and see where they cut that off at.
Thanks.
Other thing on the financial statement to talk about is in the monthly report, if you go to page 6, there's a special assessment for construction funds. And that was a project that was originally started as a special assessment that was going in several different locations within the city. It was going to be bonded for something in the area of $7 million, something like that. Well, as we got into the project, it turned out that the landowners either didn't want to do the deal, or they were going to pay their money, pay their assessment right up front and not bond it out. So we're down to a bond of about $1.5 million. That's too small to fool around with, so what we're going to do is just move that into the sales tax, and we'll carry it out of there, and when the money comes in, we'll pay back sales tax and take it that way. Because like I say, $1.5 million is just not sufficient for that. And then one other good piece of information we got today, as you all know, we sold the flood control bonds today, We got the taxable, or tax exempt piece came in at 307, an incredible rate, and the RZ bond section, that part of it, if you recall what happens there, you sell the bonds at a taxable rate, and you get a 45% rebate from the federal government against that rate. That came in at 319. So we had a very, very successful sale. As someone was just saying, these bonds will never be refunded. They'll be out there. We won't refund it. Let's put it that way. I'd be very surprised if we ever did. So we had a very successful offering, and it should be a good transaction for the city for some time to come.
And Gene, just to refresh, these bonds were competitively bid?
Yes. Merrill Lynch took the tax exempt part at a 307, and Morgan Keegan and Company took the RZ bonds at a 319. Now, I will tell you, these are still a little bit flexible. They could move 2, 3, 4 basis points. The reason is that we don't, Merrill Lynch did not put as much of a premium on the sale as they've typically been doing, so we've had to actually issue some more bonds. The numbers stay the same, but you've got to actually issue additional bonds because we didn't get enough money to cover the total project. So we're very pleased about that. And I don't know if there's anything else that I can tell you. Like I say, we've got these two big variables out there, the sales tax and the weather. And all we can do is wait and see at this point.
Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Gene, you mentioned earlier that we kind of put aside $7 million on the operating side of the budget.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what some of that $7 million deals with?
A good portion of it was fuel.
Okay.
We bought on contracts, and then the individual departments identified projects that they could, or activities that they could hold back on until we get past the first of the year. We don't really have a list of what the departments did themselves, other than they're accounting for a certain amount of money.
Thank you.
Councilor Knudsen?
Director Roanhorst, I'd just like to thank you again for leading our finance department for our great city, and I'd like to congratulate you and everyone else involved on the very recent announcement of a Moody's AAA rating. I'm very proud of our city's financial situation.
Well, just a slight correction, Councilman. It was a AA3 rating.
Okay, thank you.
Not AAA. I wish it was, but and the reason it's a AA3 rating is it's a revenue bond. It's not a general obligation bond. The City of Sioux Falls has general obligation capacity in excess of $2 billion today. We have never dipped into that capacity. That would require an election to use it, and some of it would be restricted to, like, water. But nonetheless, it's a huge, huge capacity that we have to use should it ever become necessary to do it. But we do not have any general obligation bonds, and there's no plans to get involved in it.
Councilor Brown?
Could you also give us an update on the CIP projects? I know that there were projects identified to be held back, but given the bids coming in strong, we've been able to get through much of that list?
We haven't really reassigned a lot of that as yet. We've still got other things going on with that we just, like I say, there's not any reassignment at this point being done.
Any other questions for Director Roanhorst? Thank you, Gene. We'll move on. Next item on the agenda is a pension ordinance revisions discussion by Gail Eastland, Assistant City Attorney.
Good afternoon, Council. Gail Eastland, City Attorney's Office. And items 13 and 14 on tonight's agenda are amendments to the two city pension plans, the firefighters' pension fund and the employees' retirement system. The amendments are identical to each other. There's no difference between the two of them. But These amendments are simply an update of our investment of asset portions of the pension ordinances. If you look in the ordinance book, you'll see the last time that these particular ordinances were amended were in 1969. So there's been some changes in the way investments occur these days, and in fact, the pension boards had a couple of proposals brought to them that were looked into, and simply then the staff and the boards realized that our ordinances needed to be updated. So Sherry Rotard, attorney with Boyce Greenfield Law Firm, was retained by the pension boards because of her expertise in business and securities and investment law to draft a relatively straightforward amendment to both of those funds. And Sherry is here tonight to give you a summary of the amendments and answer questions that you may have for her.
Good afternoon. Sherry Brodert from Boyce, Greenfield, Pashby, and Welk. As Gail mentioned, these I would probably classify these ordinances as more housekeeping. They haven't been touched since 1969, and how investments are made since 1969 has changed quite a bit. The existing ordinances are structured so that the boards can invest plan assets in two different ways. The first way is the board could retain a third-party funding agent to invest the planned assets on their behalf. Or the second way the board could handle the planned assets is by investing the funds directly. The proposed amendments retains that same structure. The board can elect to have a third party invest the planned assets. The primary difference is we are expanding the third parties that the board can work with. Right now, the only opportunity for the board is to work with a funding agent as defined in the state statute, which is an insurance company or trust company. We're expanding that to include a registered investment advisor, as I'm sure many of you people use for your own personal assets. The second change is if the board wants to invest planned assets directly, the existing ordinances limits the type of investments that they may do, and that does not give the board the flexibility to make changes based upon the needs of the the needs of the boards or the existing market conditions like last September. So the proposed ordinance requires the board to adopt an investment policy with outside investment advisors, review it periodically, taking into account risk, the needs of the boards, the appropriate rate of return, and if it chooses, it may make investments in accordance with the investment policy if adopted. The ordinance also adds in oversight by outsiders to come in and scrutinize the investment policy decisions that have been made, and it further reflects that all decisions by the board must be made in accordance with its fiduciary duties. So I think that's it in a nutshell. I'm not the best public speaker, I apologize, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Councilor Knudsen?
Well, first of all, you're doing just fine speaking to us, and welcome. Is that a question? And so from what you know of other comparable-sized cities in the Midwest, would this proposal mirror what the Omahas and the Lincoln, Nebraskas and the Minneapolises and Fargos would do?
Yes. It is. You have the boards for a reason to make these types of policy investments, and so it was quite unusual to see an ordinance that said if you decide to do this on your own, you can only invest assets in these 5 things or work with a trust company or insurance company. So I think we're really bringing the ordinance into what other comparable regional communities have. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Sherry? Or
Nobody
Gail?
wants my investment opinion on anything?
What are you recommending?
Buy low, sell high.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other items for discussion at the informational meeting? We do have an executive session scheduled after this. Anything council wants to discuss before that time? If not, I will take a motion to move into executive session for the purposes of contractual matter and personnel matter.
I so move. Knudsen.
Is there a second?
Second, let's.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll go into executive session in 1 minute.
You got 1 minute.
1 minute.